Okay, I have an announcement. You know that you have your midterm exam.
5 December.
Okay, everyone says something different. Let me just show you from here. Okay. December 8th. Okay, so on December 8th there is your midterm. It will be 2 class hours, and I will be in the US at a conference. So on December 1st, Thursday, I'm not here. Instead, there's a makeup class, sorry, on the 30th of November at 6:30. I know. I don't like it either, but this is going to be a review for your exam, so I have to do it. Before I go, I really have to do it, okay? So instead of December 1st, we will have a class on 30th of November. Please make a note. Yes, it is Wednesday evening. Wednesday evening, please speak in English. That is not the topic of this class hour. Okay, so today I asked you to submit your assignments from the Moodle website. If you just click on this here, that's Turnitin assignment. So if you haven't done it yet, I checked it a couple hours ago, there were still like 20 people who didn't. So please, if you haven't submitted online, please do that as soon as the class hour is over. Today we will have 1 hour, and then on Thursday we'll have 2 hours. Today I don't want to do the full 2 hours, okay? So I also want a hard copy of it. It's easier for me to actually read it from the hard copy, and there will be corrections on them. That's why I want both a hard copy and a soft copy, okay? All right. Okay, let's remember, after this huge break, let's remember what we were doing. I think we already covered Otto Hinse. Yes?
How many hours will we make up?
This will be for only 1 hour. Yeah, we're losing 1 hour, we're making up for 1 hour. Okay? So by the time we get really hungry, I'll let you go. Yeah. I'm going to try to arrange this classroom. But my assistant will email you anyways, okay? So you will get an email about this. I just wanted you to give you a heads up. Okay. What was Otto Hinse saying? Why was his argument an interesting argument? What did he explain? The difference between what? Which countries? It's on there, you know, it's on the slide. So I'm not asking a huge conundrum. Yes, what is this person? What's that? Okay, but what's the argument? Tell me the argument. Okay, he's trying to explain how wars affect regime types of countries, okay? So this is, when you're preparing for your exam, this is the kind of question and answer that you should consider. So Otto Hinse's argument is on the effect of wars on regime type, right? So he looks at how some states end up being authoritarian and some states end up being more democratic. So he actually takes the example of Prussia versus England, and then he says, well, all the wars in continental Europe, well, not all, but most of the wars in continental Europe took place in France or Prussia, okay? where today's Germany is. So as a result, these countries have evolved more authoritarian than a country such as England, because England has had the advantage of being an island or being away from the continent. Okay, so his argument was more about the geopolitics of the geopolitics and how wars and location of countries affect those countries' regime type. So, guys, we also argued that international conflicts have an effect on a restrictive effect on political rights, because during war times we need unity. We need fast decisions, and we need decisions sometimes that can be quite cruel. So these were the discourses of leaders, and these leaders have told us throughout history that if we don't restrict political rights, then we're not going to be able to win the war. And if we don't win the war, what happens? We lose, okay. What does losing a war mean?
Everything.
Losing everything. Okay, so usually the generals and leaders will argue that losing a war actually will mean losing everything, losing the lives of our sons and daughters.
National humiliation.
Okay, national humiliation. Okay, so all these discourses are related to losing wars. And it might be true that losing wars might lead to all these things, but at the same time, these consequences are portrayed because the leaders always are in this constant struggle of not giving up their power to the public. Remember, I told you that there's a constant struggle between the leaders and the public. The public wants more rights. Leaders don't want to give more rights. Of course, they want to keep their monopoly on power. Okay? That constant struggle was something that we emphasized. And we said that suffrage has become a very important weapon. How was that? Why was suffrage important? How did wars affect suffrage?
Well, Wilhelm's Germany led to the First World War. Didn't ask the public to whether we go to a war or not. Mm-hmm. Therefore, to share the burden of the politicians and throw it to the public shoulders.
Okay, so you're sharing the burden. Well, in the case of, I brought you numbers with me. In the case of UK, guys, suffrage increased in different times, all related to wars, actually. In 1832, only 3% of adult males were voting. We're talking about the most democratic country, right? So we're talking about the cradle of democracy. And as late as 1832, you had only 3% of adult males that had the right to vote. And then in 1867, there's another wave of suffrage in the UK. And then in 1884, one more. And in 1918, suffrage has become almost universal in UK. So we're talking about the first in many things in the world, right? We remember UK as the first democracy, but in the first democracy of the world, the evolution of suffrage was only developed fully in 1918. And that is because of the war, okay? The Great War. In other countries, I have numbers of other countries as well. For example, in Italy, by 1912, the suffrage was only around 6–7%. So we're talking about Europe, where democracy has been has been more of a norm compared to other parts of the world. And I have, you know, these ridiculous looking numbers. But don't think that it was very easy to get the suffrage rights. The suffrage rights, getting the suffrage rights went quite hand in hand with wars. And the reason was extraction of resources, right? So when you want your citizens to pay, or when you want your citizens to die for you, it makes sense to give them the right to vote. And that's how it takes place in the world. Another thing that I want to mention is all the countries in Europe, almost all the countries in Europe, subscribed to conscription policies after Napoleonic Wars. Remember, Napoleon said, well, if I bring conscription as a citizenship duty and a right, then I can actually get people to die for me willingly, so I will have more soldiers. And I can conquer the world if I have more soldiers. Well, most states in Europe have followed that policy of conscription, except for the UK, except for Britain. So in Britain, there was huge pressure not to get into a conscription system, because conscription was thought to be a huge burden on citizenship, and it was thought to be a means of taking away the rights of a man. And it was not accepted as a democratic thing. We actually talked about conscientious objection in this class, right? So we were saying that conscientious objection was about having the right to say no to military service. That was not possible in Europe before the world wars, after Napoleonic Wars, okay? So democracy then, the idea of democracy actually was quite connected to the idea of international relations and wars especially. Now, I'm going to, move on to this other presentation. It's also at Moodle, but I put it online today, so you might not have seen it yet. It's online now. What do wars lead to? Well, we said that wars actually lead to more democracy, sometimes, and sometimes more autocracy. So wars can go both ways. It can lead to both of these things. Another thing that wars lead to is physical destruction. And what's physical destruction? What do I mean by physical destruction?
Infrastructure and severe decline.
Okay, severe decline in population. That means killing of people, right? And you put it very politely, thank you. So people get killed, and as you lose people, you actually lose more than just, bodies. You lose what? Production. What a cold thing to say, but it is the truth, isn't it? What did you say? Workers. Okay, wonderful. Production, workers. You lose all these things when you lose bodies, when you lose people, when you lose men. But one more thing. Think more sentimentally. What? Fathers and sons. Okay, you are sentimental. Holiday really worked. Legalization of the, this is your sentimental thinking? Okay, legalization of power. Okay, but be more sentimental. I'm trying to get at it. Suffering of people. People starving. You're still talking about production, though, right? People starving is related to production. Decline in production. What else? When you lose people, what else do you lose? What do people have? Money. I don't have a very sentimental bunch of people here.
Might be territory.
Territory, okay, but that's really not sentimental either. That's quite material. Okay. Population, okay. What do people do different than animals? Thank you. Okay. People actually think. People think. So what am I going to connect this to? What's one of the main themes of this course? Intellectual properties. What? What else? What's remember that yin-yang picture? What's inside the core? You're from the economy department, aren't you? You're not, you are. Okay, okay. Okay, but state building. What else was there? Okay, so innovation, right? What do people do to innovate? Come on, guys. Okay, so as you lose people, physical destruction has different aspects of it. As you lose people, you actually lose people's ideas as well, okay? Yes, you lose fathers and sons, and you lose production. You lose the chance to legalize certain modes of power. But at the same time, you lose innovations. So you go back in time. As you get into a war, as you lose the war, you definitely lose the opportunity to innovate. Were you going to say, what if you win?
No, because I can do opposite, that if you get the country destructed, you have opportunity, like Germany, Japan, South Korea, they will bomb away, then they rise up very fast.
Okay, okay. So whenever we talk about war, we always talk about both positive and negative aspects of war, right? So if we talk about only negatives, we're only looking at one side of the picture. Just like the connection between war and regime type, the connection between war and destruction is two-sided, is double-sided. Okay, so yes, you get destruction actually leads to decline in production. It leads to decline in innovations, military technology, and all that. But at the same time, you have an opportunity to actually go back on your feet and innovate again and produce again. This actually will bring me to one of the arguments about today's world. Some theorists actually argue that, if you get into an economic crisis, a more easy way to get out of economic crisis is a war and war industry, because war industry will give a boost to your economy. That also actually is quite cold, but it is, a reality that when you have a crisis, remember between the First World War and the Second World War, you have a huge economic crisis, the Great Depression. And then after the Second World War, all the economies in Europe will start, will get a boost and will develop. That's because of several things, including the American help to the Western European continent, right? So it's not just Marshall Plan, but it's part of it. It's also, one part of it is solidarity after wars, don't you think? Once a war is over, what happens in the society? So how does a war affect the society after a war?
They come together for a few days.
For a few days. Well, I would say for a few years. For a few days would be a little too much of an exaggeration. But for a few years, people will feel, well, it's called the rally around the flag effect. Okay? People will feel solidarity during the war. And once the war comes to an end, when people are recovering from that war, they will be more willing to cooperate with one another.
They will eat their own sons.
Did you say they will eat their own?
Well, the revolution eats.
Okay. Okay, so it's not, okay, it's not, you're not talking about literally eating your own son. Okay, good. For a moment, I was scared there. Mehmet, did you have something to add?
They face the states.
Mm-hmm.
And then they lose the war.
Well, if you lose the war, right? If you are a winner of the war, you know, that nothing much will change really in terms of your production or in terms of your solidarity. But losing a war will have huge effects. But guys, France was a winner in the world wars. But France was hugely destructed as a result of the wars. All of Europe was hugely destructed as a result of the Second World War. Don't you think that we can connect the establishment of the European Union to actually that physical destruction? So what was the European Union established for in the beginning?
To stop new war.
To stop a new war. But in the beginning, it was actually coal and steel, right? An economic unity. It was not actually a political unity at all. So at first, it was actually the main goal of the EU was to recover from the physical destruction of the war. Afterwards, it becomes a political and cultural and several other things, several other unities all at once. But at first, it aimed to recover from physical destruction, okay? Well, wars, on the other hand, are quite costly for its leaders, especially if the war takes place in a democratic country. What does that mean? If I get into a war, let's just say that I decided to go to a war with Paul Williams' class, okay? And let's just say you're ready to fight. Okay, I don't even need Magnus to organize you, my general to organize you. You want it. So let's just say that I got into that war. And as a result of that war, half the class, knock on the wood, died. And the other half came back from war, and I'm alive. I didn't die. Okay? What?
They can make victories. The result is important.
Mm-hmm. The result is half of the class is dead, and we lost. Oh, you're saying, okay. You're saying that if half the class was dead and we won.
This is General's fault.
Let me ask you something. Oh, Magnus is at fault here. Well, sorry. Let me ask you something. Does it really matter? If half the class is dead, does it matter that we won or lost?
In some cases.
At least they wouldn't die in vain.
At least they wouldn't die in vain. That's nice discourse. Okay. If you win, at least they didn't die in vain. What else? Do you think that, would you still like to see me as your leader after half the class died?
If we were victorious, yes.
If half the class died, but we're victorious,
You're still yes.
and I'm still alive, then it's okay? Is there anyone who says that I should go if half the class dies? Mehmet said, okay, why?
My friends.
Okay, so your sons and your daughters die. So, okay, you are thinking quite emotional today. Okay, so if you win or if you lose, there will be people who will think that all these deaths are in vain. Even if you win, if I lose half the population of my country, then that is quite unsuccessful. In democracies, usually, in situations like that, the country will will vote out its leader, Okay? So one more consequence of wars in terms of regime type is the leader will be voted out if you get into a war that you lost in a democracy. And there is a huge possibility that you will be voted out if the physical destruction of the war was too much. Okay? So if I actually taxed you a lot, if I increased the taxes, if I actually, Magnus, my general, by the way, it will be me who will be voted out as well as him. He will be voted out as the general as well, but he will continue his career as a military person. Me, on the other hand, will most probably be retired, and I will, lead a different kind of life after being voted out. So the argument, the liberal argument in international relations is that in democracies, leaders will be picking the wars that they will win. Okay? So you won't want to get into a war that you calculate that you will be losing. Because if you lose, you'll be voted out.
So do democracy go to war?
Do democracies go to war? Absolutely. But they pick wars.
That going to war was a miscalculation of profit maximization, and it was irrational.
Okay, so the argument goes, if you miscalculate as a democracy, if you miscalculate and you lose the war, then you will be voted out. Now, here's an example from America, from the US and the wars that US actually got in. I don't want you to memorize this, okay? Just remember that it looks like most of the time, the American leaders, when they got into a war, and if they mobilized a lot of the population, which means they had a lot of soldiers involved in the war, and a lot of soldiers died in the war, then you're going to have the leader, you're going to see that the leader is voted out. Okay? So those who studied American wars have seen that after the most major wars, the leader was voted out if the country did not win, or if the war was a draw. Draw means a tie. There's no clear winner, okay? That's what a draw means. So you have to be the clear winner if you want to stay in office, especially in democracies. How about in non-democracies? Let's just say that this is an autocracy, okay? And I'm the queen, and Magnus, my general, and I actually took you to war. We didn't ask you if you would like to go to war. And we went to war, and a lot of you died. But when we came back, do you think anything will change? Most probably not. You know why? Because mostly in authoritarian states, I'm going to have a circle that will support me and your families and the families of your families, etc. And you will be quite powerful. You will be my nobles, right? Okay. And in that sense, what I'm doing is I'm protecting myself with this inner circle, and none of your families will die in war, obviously, because you're close to me. I'll be protecting you. And on the way back from war, when we're back in the country, when the war is over, even if we lost, you're going to help me, along with my general and his hold of power on the military. I don't actually have to be voted out, because in an authoritarian system, voting out is not really a tool to punish leaders. Okay? What I have told you is liberal theory on wars, and like all the other arguments that I'm talking about in this course, it's a theory. It's not, we can't say that it's 100% true or 100% wrong, okay? It's just a theory. There are examples that support it, and there are examples that don't support it. Yes?
What about George Bush runs 2 terms?
Mm-hmm.
Does that conflict with this theory?
Does it?
Well, isn't there also a view that sometimes, I don't know where I've read this, but I remember coming upon an argument that sometimes it's better to put in a wartime president because there is a greater chance of something going wrong. So even things aren't great, but at least this guy's
absolutely
is involved in it.
So that argument says you don't want to change your leader during the war. As the war continues, you still want me. Because if you change me, what will happen? You know, at least you know my strategy. I've been your leader for a while. But if you change me in the middle of the wartime, then you're actually changing everything because I'm going to change Magnus. I will replace Magnus with Celal. Okay? Exactly. So you don't change, what was it? You don't want to change your horses in midstream. So that's kind of like the argument, okay?
I believe no one will be busy with that kind of thing during the war.
No one would actually be concerned?
Yes. I mean, because there will be a mobilization, most probably.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone will be either on the front or in the back page, building weapons or something.
Okay, so everyone will be working for will be in a war effort, you're saying. And in that war effort, it doesn't matter who your leader is? The whole literature on leadership goes against that.
Yes, but is there an example that has happened? I mean, during the wartime, in the 20th century, the leader has changed during wartime.
See, if there's no example, one would argue that states don't change their leaders in the middle of war times because, yeah, they don't because it's not a smart thing to do. That's the idea, yeah.
During the Vietnam War, the president of the United States has changed.
Absolutely.
Times.
Okay, so Vietnam War was quite an exception. You know why? It took such a long time, right? Okay, it was a very long war, and it was not a very active war for the US. So there were different incrementalist policies to pull out of Vietnam, but none of those policies actually worked for several years until the very end. So changing, but here's the thing. This same argument would argue that, well, if you are not able to win the war, you will be voted out in a democracy. So that's why Vietnam War was an example in the other slide. Raiden.
It also depends like how successful the government is in regards to propaganda and such.
Absolutely.
Because if you manage to mobilize the media, change governments can stay for many terms. And I think that's what maybe was happening in Vietnam as well. That because of the media wasn't really mobilizing around this where it was difficult.
And public opinion has changed during the Vietnam War, right? So the media actually started not supporting the war because the public was not supporting the war in the Vietnam War anymore. Now, if you think about the effect of media, I would say that media is a huge medium of spreading your ideology. So why did the Cold War take such a long time to come to an end? Propaganda was a huge factor in that, right? Why did the Bush administration got reelected? Because there was still propaganda going on about weapons of mass destruction. Was there weapons of mass destruction in Iraq or not? So that was still the case. I actually, at the time, I still was living in the US, and I was asking my friends about the situation because I just couldn't conceive, I couldn't understand how and why Bush would get reelected. And my friends would say, well, as long as you can't prove that Iraq is a huge threat, or is not a huge threat, he still will win. And there was other factors. Now, one more thing, guys, don't forget that getting elected does not depend on one factor. Doesn't depend on foreign policy making or foreign policies of a government. In the last elections in Turkey, foreign policy was not even, a huge item in the agenda. Foreign policy making of the political parties was not a huge part of getting elected or not. There were other issues, different internal, domestic issues that were part of the agenda. So foreign policy making is just one factor. But if you are in a war, and if we are talking about losing a war, you can be pretty confident that that's not going to be very good for the leader in a democracy, okay? And that actually brings the idea that a democracy will not want to get into every single war. It will pick the war from the wars that it can win. Let me ask you a question. Do you remember that in 2003, maybe you don't remember, okay, you were too young. In 2003, the impression was the US would get in Iraq, get rid of Saddam, install free and fair elections, democracy, and get out. So that was the plan. And no one actually really thought that it would be so difficult to get out. Even today, Obama government says that they will get out soon, right? But as they are getting out, they're leaving security companies behind. Leaving American security companies behind means you're not really getting out fully. Okay? No one can hear you right now.
I'm just thinking, so I'm not saying.
Okay. Think and then let us know. All right. So here's another thing about wars and the international system. Usually states think that wars will last short. Don't you remember that we talked about this before the First World War and Second World War? People think that, we'll just get into this war. We will offend, we will bomb the hell out of the place, and then we will get out. It never happens that way. Wars, later on, after they start, they become defensive. We will talk about the ideology of cult of the offensive later in a couple of weeks. But one thing that you should keep in mind is we don't actually foresee all the consequences of wars. If we could, no state would get into a war, would they? I mean, it would be really ridiculous to get into a war that you foresee that you will lose. Yes. Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
They also created the largest embassy complex
Mm-hmm.
in the world in Iraq, so I don't think they have any.
So getting out is relative, right? So if you get your troops out, does that actually mean you're getting completely out? Okay. Absolutely. So you still have some presence there. Now, another thing that we're going to talk about is social cohesion. How do wars affect the society? This is something that I mentioned 10 minutes ago. Well, there are two hypotheses, okay? The first one says wars will positively affect social cohesion, meaning external threat will trigger a rally around the flag effect, meaning if I actually decide to invade your country, that is an external threat, you will immediately feel and perceive it as a threat, the invasion. And then that's going to trigger the society to get together, which we call social cohesion, okay? So the society will work together. That's kind of what we called solidarity so far, okay? That kind of solidarity, though, will start slowly eroding, declining, if the threat does not look as serious, as imminent, close, and as continuous as it was before. Okay? So the first hypothesis says war leads to more social cohesion. The second hypothesis says in time, war will decrease the social cohesion. Solidarity will decrease because people will start believing that the threat is not as important or imminent as it was before. My example will be, again, invasion of Iraq in 2003. At first, there was huge support for both the operation to Afghanistan and also to Iraq in the American public. And that was because 9/11 was so fresh, and the loss of 9/11 was extremely fresh, right? Do you guys actually remember?
Yes.
You do, right? Okay. I feel very old from time to time. That's why I just checked. So you remember that people actually felt, in the US, people actually felt that they are shut at home. This is what we feel every time we hear of a terrorist attack in Turkey. It has become an everyday experience, right? Every day when we get out of our homes, we wonder. Now, that's the psychology that I want you to consider here, okay? So once the threat is very imminent and you feel that it can hurt you any moment, it's very close, you feel social cohesion. What happens after a couple of years if the threat is not reinforced or no one attacks you for a couple of years? You start relaxing. You start thinking, this threat is no longer a threat anymore. And because of that, this whole rally around the flag effect starts going down. Okay? So there is a curvilinear relationship in the relationship between wars and social cohesion. It will increase first. After a while, it will start going down. Now, what is the reason for... I have a fancy slide for you. If the threat is clear and it is an external threat, so the ideology of nationalism can be used to trigger a rally around the flag effect, then things are fine, there's more social cohesion. If the threat is not that big anymore, or if the government does not carry out enough propaganda to portray the threat, to demonstrate what the threat is, or where the threat is coming from, or if there is not enough evidence to back up your claim of a threat, then social cohesion is going to start going down. Another important factor is the mobilization effort. That means, I keep coming back to this, I know, but if I ask you to die for me, and if I convince you that it's a good idea to die for your country, to die, but not only to die, but to die for your country, then the next thing that I will do is to conscribe you, send you to war, and sooner or later, some of you, again, will start dying, okay? What happens then? The mobilization effort will sooner or later lead to social unrest, okay? People will sooner or later start saying, I don't want to die. I don't want my son to die or my daughter to die, okay? So this whole wars and social cohesion equation gets affected by how the governments start mobilizing people and how mobilization of people will sooner or later lead to losses of lives. Okay, I was actually these days I'm studying peace operations, international organizations, and peace operations in civil conflicts, and I realized that most countries do not want to send their soldiers to peace operations. Once there are casualties, once there are one person getting killed in a peace operation, or 2 or 5, you would think that 5 is not that big, right? Or 1 person is not that big, right? But most countries have little tolerance, especially Turkey, have little tolerance for soldiers getting killed in peace operations. Why is that?
They're only there to keep peace, not an aggressive type.
I can't hear you.
Because they're only there to keep peace and they're not aggressors, so they
Okay, peace operations are not, the soldiers in peace operations are not
hostile.
aggressive, they're not hostile. Sometimes they might, but usually they're not. They're not supposed to be hostile. What else? They're coming from outside.
Yeah, that's for international courtesy.
They're there for international courtesy. Sometimes more than that. Sometimes, you know, you want some support, like Turkey sending soldiers to Korea, right? So you want something else, and it makes sense to send soldiers to peace operations. So there might be political gains. What else?
There's no threat to the nation to mobilize support for the war.
Okay, so for me to mobilize you, I need to make a speech to you where you will feel that dying for your country is a good idea. But if I tell you that you will be dying for Paul Williams' students, you're not going to really want that, will you? So the difference then is I am not able to create the rally around the flag effect when I'm sending soldiers to peace operations. So there's no social cohesion in the beginning, so you can't expect the social cohesion to increase as you lose soldiers in a peace operations. But it's different if you are part of the war, if your existence is under attack. So that's why I'm actually trying to prepare you today for what's coming in the next week or so. We're going to start talking about ideologies, okay? So if I can use my ideology to mobilize you, and if I can continue doing that, then you will be fine and social cohesion will stay put. But if I can't use my ideology and propaganda, sooner or later, once your son, your cousin, your someone that you know, your friend dies, you will not want to be part of that war. So that's why wars first increase social cohesion. After a while, if you can't keep the population up with that propaganda and ideology, then social cohesion will start decreasing. There will be unrest. My best example is, again, the Iraqi War of 2003 until today. Another example is Vietnam War also. You can come up with several examples with this. Okay, I'm going to finish now, and on Thursday we're doing 2 hours, okay? Thank you.
Zaten